Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Pakistan has been facing economic difficulties, and these difficulties and the challenges were exacerbated by the devastation which was caused by the floods in summer 2022. Pakistan had an IMF program already which was signed by the previous government of Pakistan, Tehrik-e-Insaf, in 2019. Now, after the devastation which was caused by the floods in summer 2022, the hopes were set by the incumbent government towards the IMF to show some flexibility, but on the contrary, the IMF had put some tough conditions for Pakistani authorities to meet, despite international calls by various organizations, especially by the United Nations as well as the Human Rights Watch, that Pakistan should be given some flexibility for sustainable recovery. Then we saw there was a delegation of the IMF which was in Pakistan for the 9th review talks, but after those talks, the staff level agreement for the release of the tranche of $1.1 billion by the IMF is still pending. There were continuous changing goalposts by the IMF, and there were certain tough measures the government had to take in order to meet those conditions, and the government did that, and the government authorities had repeatedly been saying that the Pakistani authorities remain committed and determined to complete the IMF program. Now, last month, the IMF had said, while it was continuously changing the goalposts and setting new conditions for Pakistani authorities to meet, it said, let me quote, ensuring that there is sufficient financing to support the authorities is the paramount priority. A staff level agreement will follow once the few remaining points are closed, unquote. Now, there are certain reports that the United Arab Emirates has agreed to likely ensure and assured the IMF to finance Pakistan with $1 billion. Earlier, we saw the State Minister of Finance, Aisha Ghospash, also saying that Saudi Arabia had also given assurances to the IMF that it will be financing $2 billion to Pakistan. We'd already seen that China had also earlier rolled over $2 billion in support to Pakistan as well. There is another development regarding the IMF, which has lowered Pakistan's economic growth to 0.5% for the current fiscal year. It comes after the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank both lowered economic growth of Pakistan to 0.4% and 0.6% respectively. We'll be talking about this particular delay and the kind of developments, the kind of assurances by the friendly countries, especially by Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. How likely is it that the staff level agreement is going to be reached? How badly it is required, and what kind of damages to Pakistan's economy it has done, that a particular delay, and what does this lowering of Pakistan's forecast of economic growth mean? We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Faad Waheed. He is Senior Vice President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Faad, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. On Skype, we are being joined by Dr. Shimail Daud. He is Senior Economist. Dr. Shimail Daud, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Later in the show, we'll be joined by another participant. I'll be introducing him then. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Shimail Daud. Now, let me begin with this particular fact. The IMF has lowered the economic growth forecast for Pakistan to 0.5%. I think we've lost the connection with Dr. Shimail Daud. We'll go back to him for the discussion and his view on this particular thing. Now, a lowering of economic growth forecast for Pakistan to 0.5%. It was already forecast around 3.5% back in October by the IMF. What are the core reasons for this, and what does it mean for the market?
Well, let me be very honest and very straight up on this. See, the 3.5% and converting that and lowering down that to 0.5% is something very staggering and something very alarming for the situation at this point, because we're not just seeing this in Pakistan, we're seeing it throughout the globe. It's a global recession. If you talk about US has already, there's about 3 banks that have defaulted in the past 6 months. And we're already on the crash course of seeing that all economies have projected their initial projections were higher, which are being lowered. And for Pakistan, it's a bigger problem, because after COVID, we were already opening this market, and the past 1.5 years, we started to see some little growth, but then we lost all the dollars we had. So the problem really lies where we are import dependent. we did not substitute our imports. So, and that's where the real problem lied with Pakistan. And amidst all this, the business community, the problem where it lies is because we can't continue our business as usual. We're having these hurdles of LC openings and all these problems that, frankly, most of the raw materials we have all are imported. So when we don't have those imported materials, we can't make the final product and we can't sell it anywhere. When we talk about exports, we're very belittling our exports as well, because the same item we import, we also value added and export that as well. So this is very alarming, because let's say IMF deal was to be done in September. We've been in the talks from September, and today we've already almost done in April now. So this 8-month gap has already created a lot of uncertainty in the market of the business. See, the staff level agreements did not go through. And I'm hoping, and Pakistan is hopeful, that our finance minister does a very good job, and he concludes this 9th review, and we get this $1 billion. So the LCs are open, all the foreign exchange gets better. All these kinds, everything is now grounded to the US dollar. So that's one hell of a problem for every one of us.
Right. We are joined by Dr. Shimail Daud also. Dr. Shimail Daud, as the IMF has lowered the forecast for Pakistan's economic growth for the current fiscal year, it was already projected back in October at 3.5%, from 3.5% to 0.5%. What does it depict? What factors do you think have mainly led to this projection?
Well, obviously, we have suffered from, the situation with balance of payment issues, the trade deficit, the pressure on the fiscal side. So all of these pressures resulted into, the problems were already there, but then obviously the floods kind of impacted further the situation. And obviously the rising prices of commodities put pressure on our imports. Regarding oil and so forth and so on. And so the government took, I would say that government took stringent actions also by under pressure of the IMF program, and after a lot of discussions, I think the results we can see that the current account deficit has reduced even in this revision, where the GDP has been revised downwards, but the good side of it is that the current account deficit has reduced. The inflation is on the higher side, but there is an estimate that there is going to be improvement, or you can say a downward turn towards the inflation in the coming financial year. And also we are expecting a rebound in terms of the growth, where right now it is 0.5%, but we are hoping that going forward there's going to be a rebound and the economy is going to start coming back. With all of this, we have to understand that despite all,
can we expect that bouncing back or the rebound of economy?
I think as was mentioned by the Islamabad Chamber's president, that the good side is that, well, there has been a delay, no doubt. The markets have suffered obviously because of the blockade of the LCs and the stringent actions taken by the government to control the balance of payment and so forth and so on. But if we would say that now that we have the commitment from Saudi side, we are hoping that the good news is coming from the UAE side. So once those funds are there, the SLA gets through and the funds are released, I think going forward, the markets, you will see already today there was a positive sentiment, and the markets, recovered with this news already. So I think once that starts coming in, there's going to be less pressure in terms of the imports. And I think that because, as rightly said, that our exports are import-led, and so a lot of the raw materials which were blocked will start coming in. And also in this report in the World Economic Outlook, obviously it is mentioned that the world over there is, the markets are slowing down, even the large countries, the developed economies are slowing down rapidly. I think China and India are perhaps the exceptions, or in our region, maybe Bangladesh is an exception, that are doing a lot better comparatively. But most of the countries, if you look at it, is less than 1%, and a recession in UK in US is like 1.6%. So all of this means that we're not the only ones. The Ukraine war and then the additional climate change, all of this has had a toll on our economic situation. But I'm hopeful that as this balance of payment situation gets better, I think we would be on the road to recovery. And then obviously it will take another 1 to 2 years before we start getting back on track.
Right, Dr. Shimail Daud, as you have already mentioned that the Pakistan's economy has that very potential. It has also been said by the Asian Development Bank at the same time when it lowered the forecast for Pakistan's economic growth to 0.6%. But given with macro fiscal and structural reforms, which particular area to start with?
Well, I think in developing going forward, one of the things that the government has already done was free float of the currency, because whenever if the government or any financial institutions tries to play with the supply and demand, it definitely has impact, and obviously the balance of payment is also hurt. So that going forward, other than this, obviously austerity measures and cutting down further on loss-making enterprises. Consumption patterns have already started to, you can say, turn around. So we see there at least a 30% downward trend towards the consumption of our fuel. So we have to, I think the government has to focus on alternates, changing of consumption patterns, cost saving, and then revenue generation internally within the country. And that means that all those segments of the society that transact, that play a part in the economic growth, but are not, giving back to the exchequer, they need to be brought into the fold so that our fiscal deficit is reduced. Current account deficit obviously will be reduced as our trade deficit and all those things are also curtailed. And if that trend is continued, that only essentials are imported, and those things that can be replaced by alternates, that is the sort of approach I think that will go in further strengthening, macroeconomically, and will help the economy to, turn around as far as the balance of payment and our dependence on foreign debt is concerned. But having said that, I must say that despite all these difficulties, the government of Pakistan has been successful in returning back, 10 to 11 billion dollars in our, you can say the amount that we owed. So that is all positive. We have paid our due in terms of our bonds. So all these are positives despite a very difficult situation where a lot of there was, negative sentiment in the markets and around the world. People were expecting totally different. So I think we've done so far well, and I hope that good days will come. But the government needs to understand that as soon as it gets out of the IMF, if it requires to go back to IMF or not, it needs to be taking care of all the disciplines that it followed under the IMF program. And that is what is usually the missed opportunity, that every time when we exit from an IMF program, we end up losing our disciplines, and that results into further, downward trend towards, markets.
Right. Let me go to Mr. Faad once again. Mr. Faad, now in this report, the World Economic Outlook, the IMF has also for the fiscal 2024 has expected the economic growth to improve to 3.5%. Do you expect the same happening from this 0.5% to 3.5% for the next fiscal?
Well, I would be a little skeptical on those numbers. I would say, 2.5 would be a better range numbers, because an economy already thriving through the IMF programs and all these problems that we've been facing from the past 6-7 years, a normal business cycle of import or export, it takes about 90 days to recover. And the continuity of business merely depends on how the economic growth and how the credibility of the country is with other countries. As rightly said by my friend here, that we need a lot of foreign exchange back. Our balance of payments is really in a bad shape. But the good thing is, in this finance division, what they have done good is they haven't missed out on any of their due payments. So all our dues are paid for. So that's a good thing that we've portrayed, and we've given the world that the fact that we're not going to default anyway. So that's the better part of it, and we've won that credibility on both parts. Saying this for the allies as well, all the friendly countries that have pledged all these amounts to us, once these come in, we will automatically, start thriving again.
So don't you think should have been a sort of a flexibility on the part of IMF, especially in the wake of the devastation that was caused by the floods. And there was call by the international organizations as well, by the United Nations and the Human Rights Watch, to give Pakistan a little space for the sustainable recovery in that regard. But you saw the IMF setting more tougher conditions, despite the government fulfilling a majority of those conditions, removing the price cap, also bringing in the finance supplementary bill, increasing the prices of the fuel, also the electricity. Yet, was it necessary to get the assurance from the external lenders or the friendly countries for that external debt payment?
See, I do understand how we're going through this, but there are certain conditions when you lend someone some money. There are certain conditions they have to pay. But I'm pretty sure, and I'm damn sure on this, that IMF definitely has tougher propositions at this point, as a human rights point of view or any kind of point of view, because we've faced all these floods not because of our own problems. There are external issues that have caused these floods, and it has been highlighted again. But again, coming back to the point, like, how does IMF look at us? IMF is still looking at us, that we're still going to live through it, we're still going to thrive through it. And the conditions might be tougher, but there's going to be a good light for Pakistan, because Pakistan is the economy we faced through with the past 3 years we've faced, the political instability and all the issues we've faced before, they're not going to be there anymore, because we're seeing a lighter road today. We're seeing businessmen point of view coming in front. And the same thing I always condemn and I always say to the government, you make business community part of your stakeholders, so we can better represent, we can better tell you how it works in the life of a business.
Right, your point is well taken. We're joined by another participant in the show, Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. He's trade arbitrator associated with the World Trade Organization. Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. I really appreciate that. A couple of developments regarding Pakistan's forecast for the economic growth that has been lowered by IMF. Earlier we saw the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank also lowering Pakistan's economic growth forecast for the current fiscal year. At the same time, the IMF says that for the fiscal 2024, it would go back to 3.5%. How likely is that? So how hopeful you are about it?
Well, everybody knows it's been a difficult time for Pakistan. So the biggest, their goal was to somehow avoid getting into a default situation. And growth was the secondary consideration. So hopefully, it's not yet over. Hopefully the default is avoided. And the measures they took to avoid that was to compress imports. Very few imports coming, very essential, like petroleum, etc. Even raw material for industries were not allowed to come. Lots of containers are stuck at Karachi, etc. So the growth was going to suffer. If there's no import, the industry is not growing, and other things. And coupled with that, devastating floods, which the impact is still lingering on. So the growth for Pakistan this year was is going to be very low compared to, say, the rest of Asia, like India or China or Bangladesh. But that's how the situation is.
Dr. Ahmad, now the Asian Development Bank at the same time has expressed the hope that Pakistan's economy has the potential to bounce back given the macro fiscal and the structural reforms. Where do we actually start? Which particular sector would you suggest?
I think both industry as well as agriculture have to grow together, because agriculture, there's so much of our employment and so much of our, it's only maybe 20% of GDP, but still it's got a lot of impact, because if the agriculture doesn't grow, we end up spending a lot of money on importing wheat and cotton and other things. So agriculture has to grow. But at the same time...
So cotton production was quite badly affected this time around because of the floods.
Yes, but it's still not there what it was a few years ago. So it's a little bit, yes, picking up, but it's still not there. And we are expecting a better wheat crop and these things, but hopefully we can do much better than what we are doing at present. But then the industry has to really grow. I mean, without exports, we are stuck. I mean, we got, last year we got 30 billion. So we cannot afford to go back to 25 billion. we have to move on. We have to move from 30 to 35 billion at least, just to cover the gap. I mean, if we get, say, 35 billion of exports, another 30 billion of, say, remittances, so that makes about 65. So that reduces the gap between the outflows and inflows.
So what areas do you think the authorities can cut the expenditure from in the immediate terms?
Immediate expenditure, imports give rise to this industrial growth, etc., and also energy cannot really be cut, and these two things. But then
now, specifically when we talk about the energy sector, so the incumbent government is focusing on diversifying the energy mix. Now, regarding the Dhar coal also, as Mr. Khurram Tasgir Khan has also said, that addition of 2,600 megawatts of electricity through local coal-based power project in Dhar is going to be added to the national grid. So that's a big step and the right step in the right direction.
Yes, it is, but at the same time, the local coal will still take some time to mature and to because some of our plants that we recently set up, like say the Saiwal or Port Qasim, etc., they were very high tech, that kind of, and they were mostly based on imported coal. So it's not that easy to convert, because our coal is they've tested it well, it's working, but it's not the same quality. It's a lot of moisture and other things. So for some of those things we'll still need LNG quite substantially, because our at least 3 major plants are based on LNG, and our gas reserves are going down. So LNG is also these things are, but we have to gradually, I mean, a little bit speed up, move towards solar and wind and other things, yes.
Right, what about solarization? That's another initiative by the incumbent government.
Yes, I mean, that is the future. So we have to move that, and the prices of these solar panels internationally. In Pakistan, somehow, unfortunately, after going down, the prices have gone up a little bit because of devaluation and because they put this ban on restriction on import. So whatever little was available went up because of shortage of these things. They went up, but solarization is the future.
Is the future. Dr. Shimail Daud, your take regarding diversifying the energy mix, especially going for the local coal and the projects related to that, as well as solarization. This is a big initiative by the incumbent government. Do you think they are going to considerably reduce that burden on Pakistan's exchequer when it comes to importing the fuel?
Kind of the need of the hour, and going forward, relying on alternate and clean source of energy is also important, specifically from the climate change and our carbon footprint, although we already have a very small carbon footprint. But all of this makes sense because our dependence on imported LNG and coal or fuel will be reduced. So I think government needs to, it's a good initiative, and the previous governments also tried it, but I think there wasn't enough work or enough focus on it. So now these targets need to be reestablished. Another challenge, obviously, as mentioned by Dr. Saab, is that we are still dependent on solar panels for import, because once you have to import them, and then obviously they will be installed, and it takes time to get them on board, and there is a sunk cost behind it. So definitely, I think that's the way to go. Most of the developed world is also converting rapidly. Similarly, dependence and converting from the regular fuel vehicles and automobiles to electric vehicles, not easily done, but it is an important element, and indicators and targets need to be achieved in this regard as well.
Dr. Shimail,
and this we
I
need
seek
to
your
move
pardon for
fast.
the interruption over here. The thing which makes me curious is to understand that if we, when we talk about automobiles, now going from petroleum products to be used, you're also saying the significance of using the electric cars. So where that particular electricity would be generated from? What would be the source?
Well, the point is that when we are going for solar, right now the government is focusing on solar production from their side, but having having a policy where you are encouraging the private sector to do it on their own actually puts kind of shares the burden from the government side. The second part is obviously if the domestic, if we focus on the large cities, let's say we focus on 5 or 10, first primary and then the secondary cities, and in the middle class is given specific, access to subsidize investment into this sector that can help in local production of electricity and then also conversion of vehicles and bringing in vehicles that are electric vehicles. Specifically, China still is one of the biggest producers in the world. So definitely that is the way to go. It won't be done immediately, but it could be in the medium term, the 3 to 5 years to come. But we have to look for alternates, both in the consumption, as I said, both in the production and both in the use. Similarly, as mentioned by Dr. Saab, I want to bring up a point in the agriculture. We are dependent not only on oil, but we are dependent on a lot of inputs that go into, be it the poultry industry, the soybean, we are importing cotton, we are importing finished oil, semi-finished oil. So we need to look at setting up local, agri production of those seeds, canola or soybean, so we can reduce our foreign dependence on import of soybean. We are one of the biggest importers of oil for our consumption for daily use in the world. So that definitely needs to be reduced. So these are the sorts of steps that the government can take, other than the fiscal tightening, other than the reducing the wastage and curtailing the losses that we are through large enterprises. We have to be efficient. Either they have to produce efficiently, improved, or they have to be closed down, or then maybe outsourced. So these are the steps which are already known to the previous governments, but there was always a political side to it. And I think it is about time that now the public and the government should be talking on the same page, that whatever decisions are made are not in the populist decisions, but are in the best interest of the country in the short term and the long term.
Right. Mr. Faad, when we talk about solarization or the alternate energy sources, especially Dr. Manzoor Ahmad has also mentioned, and also Dr. Shimail Daud, how the business community or the traders community actually look forward to helping the incumbent government in order to diversify the energy mix, and especially going towards the solarization? Is there any plan on the table already?
Yeah, since solarization, the policy came into effect, a lot of industries moved towards solar. Similarly, I myself put up solar in my house, in my hotel, in my different industries. As Mr. Manzoor was saying, we're highest importer of edible oil, and I'm one of those. I import the highest number of edible oil in Pakistan. But then again, that's our consumption table. We don't have it locally. We tried one of the projects in past 10 years was in Thatta. We had an experiment over a period of 3 years with the Sindh government, but the fruit didn't really come out as per requirement. But now the second area what we're cultivating is the olives. We have very good land in Chakwal area. We have very good.
Why didn't the outcomes were as per the expectation?
The
in
palm
Tata,
oil?
yeah.
Yes, it wasn't the fruit didn't have as much as oil content that it's supposed to have, but then it's going to cover large amounts of ground. So in that way, we'll waste more ground than we'll be, making out of the palms.
So do you think through the agricultural research, better research, this particular yield could be enhanced in future?
Well, there's already been a lot of studies with the same countries that we're importing from, because their interest also vested in it, that we had local agriculture grown, but the transfer of technology wasn't really possible because of the weather and climate we have in this region. But now we have better options with olives. And similarly, if we actually, try to gain more knowledge of it, and there's Italian interest in this as well, and they are also, conducting their studies in Pakistan, and I hope in this coming year we'll find a lot of, better options. And similarly, one of my personal interests would be also olives, because we can actually export that. And that's one of the industries, we actually did not tap. The problem with Pakistan in the past 35 years led was, the exports. We really didn't have more products. We just tapped into the cotton and everything. But similarly, as
can the solar panels be produced locally?
Yes, they can be, but the cost is really higher on the higher side. It's cheaper to import from China at this point. And then again, the local industry is not as protected.
What's the basic factor that makes it more costly?
Well,
the raw material?
The raw material, of course. And we can procure the same from China in less than $1, and we have to make that, and we install them today for more than $2. So the industry locally is not really protected. It's prone to all these external factors, and that's one of the problems. It didn't really happen. But then the benefit that NEPRA was giving to business community is the net metering system. So you install your solar, you start generating electricity, and if you're not using it, you start selling it to the grid. And that's one of the things that all of the major economies and maybe
that is naturally how it happens.
Yes, and no, there's another way of it is you conserve it into batteries and you use it after sunlight.
Okay.
But that's not as viable in Pakistan. So net metering is better. So that way most of the industries have already moved. And now the stoppages again because of the blockade of LCs. We don't have the solar panel available in Pakistan anymore. And the ones we already have, the price has grown up about more than 40 to 50%.
Right, to Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, do you think it's a viable option to produce solar panels locally?
Well, as just when he's in the business and he knows it, and he just said, if you try to make the same thing locally, it costs $3 than what we get from China at $1. So by forcing these import substitution things, wherever we have tried, it didn't really work. In the long term, we spend a lot of money and then we go back to the same thing. So the best thing is, for the time being, the whole world is doing it. Whether it's US or anybody, they import because it produces cheaper energy, cheaper electricity. So and similarly, my colleagues here said about some of these crops that are not possible. So we have been, for example, he says they've been trying this edible oil, and we in our land in Upper Hazara, we have been trying to grow this tea for the last so many years at our own land. And we really didn't make it, but it's just because we were into it. So what the countries do is, what their climate suits, they try to produce those things. Like Pakistan is very good for maize, this corn, they can really take it off. It used to be very good in cotton as well, but somehow something went wrong. Actually, we are not giving enough attention to having good seeds. And we are trying artificially by putting the minimum, whatever the price, they call it, the spot price, etc., are fixing an area. That doesn't work. It should be left to the market forces, and whichever we can produce cheaper, good quality, we should do that. And like we do with rice, like we do with maize. So we should try the same thing with other crops as well. So let the farmers decide what they can produce economically and export.
Do you think the better research and development, especially when it comes to educational institutions, could play a pivotal role in that regard?
Yes, and we have several of these agricultural research institutes, especially also those nuclear agriculture, related institutes. And for example, again, giving my own example, in our village, in our own land, this time we put some garlic, very special garlic, grown, this variety developed by PARC. And normally the garlic that bulb is this much, and this is really this much. So it's many times more. So these things, if they can quickly come up with good seeds, whatever they can come up, if they can't come up, they should allow this better quality seeds to come in, because that really multiplies.
So the number of crops I've seen personally over the years, we used to be not here that much here in Pakistan, but nowadays we see them quite in good quantity. For example, strawberries to be mentioned, one of them. So what was the reason behind getting such a huge yield from this particular?
Because somebody needs to be a catalyst. Because, for example, strawberry or some of these things, unless somebody, the farmers are normally, whatever their forefathers have been doing, it's wheat or others, they always continue to do that, unless there's some catalyst and unless there's some market
But of course, there would have definitely been a new agricultural methodology for the newer crops, right?
Yes.
So in that regard, how much do you think a crucial role the institutions and the research and development in the right direction can play?
I can give you an example of, say, next door India. This year, they were celebrating that they have exported $50 billion worth of it. Now look at our all industrial agriculture export combined, we just reached 30 billion. And their agriculture, that because of this pushing the new seeds and varieties, and we were about the same, say in cotton, we were producing about 13 million bales, they were 16 million bales. Now they've doubled, we have halved. China was a little bit, now they've tripled, and we have. So sometimes, you know, we old-fashioned thing like this soybean. Recently, for years they were importing. Recently they said, no, this will cause cancer. The whole world is using, the whole world this thing. And suddenly they held up everything at the port. The importers ended up paying damages. There's a lot of losses, etc. And everything modern, you know, hybrid seeds are coming. We should encourage them rather than just somebody says, oh, there's something wrong, and then we suddenly stop everything. We are not going forward. I mean, we are not modern.
Right. Let me bring in Dr. Shimail. Dr. Shimail, when we talk about the conditions which were already set by IMF, the incumbent government met most of those conditions. As I've already mentioned, bringing in the supplementary finance bill, removing the price cap on the dollar as well, hiking the electricity and fuel prices. We were pretty hopeful that after all these tough decisions, although in a way the government acknowledged that it burdened the common man also, we were hopeful that the staff level agreement was finally about to be reached, but it didn't happen. Then we saw another goalpost set by the IMF, this particular assurance by the friendly countries. Now, after there has been assurance by Saudi Arabia as well as the United Arab Emirates is likely to give a written guarantee in that regard to IMF. Do you think it is highly likely this time around that very hope is fulfilled?
I think we're kind of at the end of all the requirements that they had requested our government, and with Saudi Arabia coming through and the UAE giving the nod, and now I think they're going to give the written agreement or a written you can say with the IMF. It's definitely going to go through the SLA, and within a week or two after that, we are hoping that, you know, then the next step would take place where the funds would start being released in tranches. And I think, yes, if this has been a record for as far as Pakistan is concerned in terms of the delay of an SLA, but I think despite all these difficulties, we've come through, and I am confident that this is going to happen before June. And obviously, and then thereafter, then we hope that things will be back on track and we can move forward this difficult era, I would say.
So if the staff level agreement happens after these assurances by the friendly countries, what sort of an impact in immediate term would you think it would have on the US dollar and PKR trend?
I think, I mean, I cannot speculate or give an idea, but I think there will be a positive sentiment. We already, as of today, I think the markets will rally in a positive direction in terms of the stock market. And obviously the pressure, I mean, a lot of people are out of this uncertainty also holding on to the foreign currency. And obviously a lot of the people were doing frenzy buying as well, who were traders or importers. So I think once this cycle of uncertainty finishes, I'm hopeful that the pressure on Pak rupee versus the US dollar will definitely ease out, and you might see a downward trend in terms of this supply demand and the market establishing at a lower rate. I mean, right now, obviously the interbank was about 288 today, and so forth, and the open market was a bit higher. But I'm hopeful that this should come down and settle at a more acceptable rate. But I don't see it happening that it will go back to pre this year. But definitely, gradually, there will be less pressure on this.
Right, Mr. Faad, what is your expectation? Do you think this time around, after the assurances by the friendly countries, this staff level agreement is finally going to happen? And what sort of an impact it's going to have on the US dollar and PKR trend?
Well, similarly, as my friend here mentioned, it's not going to really, ease out all the pressure on the dollar, but definitely it'll bring a gradual and a better effect into the business. And once the cycle starts running, it's going to get better. It's only going to get better when you have a lot of dollars available, so you can proceed your day-to-day activity of the business community. If we are able to attain all those dollars, we are able to import all these materials to export these things. So we'll definitely go a little better. As it was mentioned that $30 billion already exported. 30 billion is the money we have sitting outside, comes back to Pakistan in remittances. When that confidence is also realigned, that will also increase. So it will have a...
So with the staff level agreement happening, the uncertainty would end?
Of course. The uncertainty at this point is one of the major reasons, there's a lot of pressure on the dollar. And that is going to ease out when we have this, staff level agreement. And this is going to be a milestone, because one of the problems that we've faced in the past with the IMF agreements is, after we've done with the program, we've forgotten all the promises we've made them. We've forgotten to do all those structural reforms, we actually promised. So I hope with this time around, they're very strict on this, and I hope our government also stays stringent on that, they do not deviate from the path. And lastly, I would like to mention, it was mentioned here about how to cut down expenditure. So I would say, the subsidies. We've made accustomed to our clients, to all the people of Pakistan. All these people are accustomed to all the subsidies. We have to really cut those down and bring the real numbers out. We do understand, there's a lot of problems in Pakistan, but somehow, somewhere, that one step we've took in the past 70 years, we have to take it back.
We should be going for the targeted subsidies in specific areas, not the blanket subsidies that you're saying. Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, are you also hopeful this particular staff level agreement, after these assurances, is going to be happening finally?
Yes, I think so, but in the past, I know IMF was sometimes being unreasonable, but also at the same time, we would, somehow go back on many things. For example, my colleagues mentioned about subsidies, and just about when we were getting settled, and we say, oh, we will give 100 rupees subsidy to this thing, and we don't realize the bigger picture, that petrol import will go up, and this will be very difficult. How do you manage all that? But we created uncertainty. So they ask us, how will you manage it? And then we started looking. So I do hope that whatever we are committed, we stay to that. We don't bring in artificial rupee rate and all those things. And about the subsidies, I think the best thing would be, almost everyone agrees that this steel mill has been closed for years and years and years. It's no use just keep giving salaries and keep the land. Give them to the industrial people, let them develop it. And PIA, we have enough airlines, they're running. Why put in money there? So these are some of these are very obvious candidates. We should get rid of them.
Right. Dr. Shimail, Daud, quick last comments regarding subsidies, as mentioned by Mr. Faad over here as well.
I think you've already kind of summed it up, but I'm just going to reiterate. I think targeted is the way to go. Targeted subsidies, targeted focus on reforms, and no more blanket, free rides, because that means that we do not have enough resources and we waste them. So no more wastage, and focused, activity, focused investments, and focused results where we get outcomes.
Dr. Shimail Daud, Senior Economist, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. In the studio, we were joined by Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, Trade Arbitrator, World Trade Organization. Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, thank you very much for your time also being with us. And Mr. Faad Waheed, is Senior Vice President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much for your time also for being with us. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.